Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Superman!
Greetings, fellow nerds. I'm Sasha Wood, and you guys want to know more about Clark Kent himself, the Man of Steel. So let's jump into the top 10 shocking facts about Superman. Be sure to turn on that bell notification so you never miss a nerdy list, and let's get started. Number 10. The first version of Superman was also created by Siegel and Schuster, but it was a villain created for their story The Reign of Superman, which was self-published in Siegel's fanzine Science Fiction in 1933. It was about a man who gains psychic powers and uses them for personal gain, but loses them and then laments that he didn't do anything of note with them. So the bare bones of what eventually would become Superman are there, namely the quest for morality. However, developments for a more conventional Superman began later in either that year or the following one. Speaking of early Superman brings us to number 9. Superman didn't exactly start off as the Boy Scout he is known as today. Well, was. This was due to the time period he was developed in, which was pre a lot of the censorship that would come later on. Superman used to kidnap people, terrorize them. He wasn't saddened when he wouldn't make it in time to save some of the baddies. In fact, based on how he handled some of them, they probably didn't survive. But in 1940, a new Superman was born, when new editor Whitney Ellsworth instituted a moral code of conduct for characters under his domain, including that they could never kill. This code was however different from the comics code, which would come about in 1954. Number 8. Superman is the first real popular superhero who launches the careers of all heroes who follow him. Superman comics have been published uninterrupted since 1938. Yes, even when he was dead, there were still Superman titles. 4 of them. So we know Superman is old in terms of publication, but how old is he supposed to be chronologically? Let's break that down at number 7. At first, it was just kind of vague. However, during the 70s to the 90s, he was said to be 29. But when he died during the Death of Superman storyline in 1992, he was said to be 34. And as we know from Man of Steel, 33, cause Jesus. So basically, he's in the early stages of middle age, which I'm fine with. Characters don't all have to be young and hip for people to relate to them. With luck, we'll all be 34 someday. Number 6. There are 19 types of kryptonite. Though green may be the most well known, it's not the only kind of remnant from Superman's home planet. And let's just get this out of the way, a lot of them are very silly. And great, like black kryptonite, which can split a Kryptonian into good and evil halves. Or the satirical pink kryptonite, that changed Superman's sexuality. Some may wonder, how can there be so many different types of kryptonite, and how come all of it came to Earth? But I say, keep it coming. Speaking of kryptonite brings us to number 5. It actually made its first appearance on the Superman radio show in 1943, in the episode The Meteor from Krypton, but it wouldn't make its first official comic appearance for 6 years. Number 4. Superman's death arose out of the fact that the writers had to abruptly cancel a planned storyline leading up to the wedding of Clark Kent and Lois Lane in the comics, because of the WB TV show Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. The show was planning a similar wedding arc, so an agreement was reached that the comic and show should time the wedding so they occurred at the same time, to maximize on sales. But this left the comic writers without a plot. The idea to kill Superman emerged out of a frustrated joke by Jerry Ordway, and it became a running gag that eventually got turned into one of the most well-known and iconic Superman storylines of all time. Number 3. There was almost a Superman movie starring Nicolas Cage as Superman. It was a Tim Burton project entitled Superman Lives. The plot was loosely based upon the Death of Superman storyline and was going to feature Doomsday, Brainiac, and Lex Luthor. There were numerous versions of the script, including versions before Burton was attached, simply called Superman Reborn. There are some test photos of Cage in the resurrection costume.
Like movement and stuff seems pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you were saying it'll feel a little looser the more I wear it.
But the whole thing never really came together. And while Warner Brothers was excited about the project, they ultimately pulled the plug a mere couple of weeks before the filming was set to commence. There's a really interesting documentary called The Death of Superman Lives: What Happened, so check it out if you're interested in hearing the whole story. Number 2. The Nazi High Command hated Superman, particularly after 1940 when the character was featured in Look magazine in a tale that examined what would happen in the war if Superman got involved. This showed the Man of Steel quickly taking down the Nazis and again really quickly capturing Hitler. This infuriated the High Command, who actually published an angry response in an SS newspaper. I wonder if Cap got the same response when he punched Hitler in his debut. Yep. Probably. So what tops that? Well, it's time to get complicated at number 1. As anyone who spent any time looking at the early history of comics can tell you, questions of ownership got a little messy. Siegel and Shuster were involved in more than one lawsuit to gain rights and compensation for their characters Superman and Superboy, as initially they had been paid $130 for the first Superman strip, which Detective Comics took as the complete transference of all rights surrounding the character. They sued in 1948 and lost, again in between 1969 and 1974, where the judge found that the consent they had signed at the conclusion of the previous case had transferred all their rights to National Comics, including the ability to renew the copyright on Superman. They had tried to renew the copyright in 1965. Neither Siegel or Shuster lived to see themselves regain any control over their creation. After Shuster's death in 1992, his estate signed an agreement re-granting DC all of his rights, while after Siegel's death in 1996, his estate, thanks to a provision in the Copyright Act, were able to retain 50% of the intellectual property rights of Superman. But that was not the end of lawsuits. Those for full ownership are ongoing. While Superman may stand for truth, justice, and the American way, sadly the tale of his ownership stands more for complicated legal practices. So those were the top 10 shocking facts about Superman, the Man of Steel. There's so much more to talk about, so if you want a part 2, let me know, and we'll be sure to keep doing even more nerdy lists for you guys here on Top 10 Nerd.